Council's website. Could I ask the IT colleagues to start the recording, please? And could I hand over to Cheryl to intimate any apologies? Take this heads in, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just run through the data, and if you can indicate your attendance, please. Councillor Graham Barton.
Yep, here.
Councillor John McGee.
Yep.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
I'm here, Cheryl, thank you.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
I've got apologies from Councillor Maureen Mackay. Councillor Peter Mabin.
Present, thank you.
I've got apologies from Councillor Claire Maitland. Councillor William Lennox.
On here.
Councillor Billy Crawford.
Yeah.
Councillor Neil Watts.
Good morning, Cheryl. I'm here.
Councillor Drew Felson.
Yeah.
Councillor Jennifer Hogg.
Yeah.
Councillor Elaine Stewart. I can see you, but Councillor Stewart.
What's from you? It's got a rest in the chat.
Oh, okay, no problem. That's fine. I can see you there. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, did you say Councillor Stewart can't hear?
Got a message.
Robert, could we try and... Apologies, we'll just take a minute to try and get Councillor Stewart. Oh, can you hear now, Councillor Stewart? Yep, thanks. Okay, then we'll move on to item 1 on the agenda, and that's declarations of interest. If any members would quickly... Nothing in the room, and I don't see any hands online. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, move on to item 2 on the agenda, and that's the hearing procedure. Cheryl, could you take us through that, please?
Thanks, Chair. Page 3 of papers outlines the hearing procedure this morning. So paragraph 1 highlights that the Chief Governance Officer or representative will give details of the application. Then the objectors will present their objections to committee in support of the written objections. In this case, there's 2 objectors this morning who will be given a total of 30 minutes to present their objections. Paragraph 3 highlights that the members of the committee may ask questions of the objector on the submissions that they've made, and to know that this is not to be taken as an opportunity to comment on the merits or otherwise of the planning application at this stage. Thereafter, the applicant will speak for a maximum of 15 minutes, and the members of the committee can ask questions of the applicant at that stage as well, and to note that it's not an opportunity to comment on the merits or otherwise of the planning application. The hearing will then close, and all parties will ask to withdraw to the public gallery, and the committee will consider the application and make their decision. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. We'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, and that is planning application number 23/0446/PP, and that's an application for planning permission for erection of 3 dwellings with detached garages and associated infrastructure, including change of use from agricultural land to residential domestic use, garden recreation ground at Burcloon Mill, U745 Burcloon Mill from B742 Dusty Hall to A713 Hollybush, East Ayrshire, KA6 6A9. I'm going to hand over to Barry to take us through that presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'll just run through a summary, first of all, of the site and the surroundings before moving on to a summary of the recommendation. So first, I'll just share my screen with you. Okay, so this is a location plan showing location of site outlined in red. The site is located approximately 1.5 kilometres to the north of Hollybush and around 2 kilometres northeast of Dalrymple. It's accessed via an unclassified road which links the A713 with the B742. The site is located to the south of Burcloon Mill, which is a cluster of dwelling houses. to agricultural grassland. The proposal is to erect 3 detached dwelling houses to the south of the unclassified road and the Percluan Mill cluster. The proposed houses would be located around a private access and SUDS drainage area. So you can see the SUDS area is within this area here, and there's an access which is in and out access, and the houses located around this access. The development is also avoids the high risk flood area, which is the area shown hatched in blue. And you can see the relationship of the proposal to the existing cluster. Percluan Mill is a distinctive development which is generally aligned with the Percluan Burn. The proposed houses have similarly sized footprints to those existing, and each has a slightly different configuration. The surface water drainage from the proposal and the field is proposed to be drained to the Percluan Burn, and condition 3 of the report seeks further details of surface water management of the site. So this is a larger scale and more detailed plan of the site and the proposals. So there are proposals as well for additional tree planting to add to the existing woodland, which is shown just out with the red line boundary of the site. And this is considered to more than fulfil the biodiversity enhancement requirements. An access track is also proposed to the remainder of the field, which will remain in agricultural use. The plans don't show the gradient of the site, but this will be shown in photographs. But taking levels from the flood risk information submitted, the finished floor levels of the houses would be around 1.5 to 2.5 metres higher than the road level. So this plan shows a comparison to the layout which was refused under the previous application for 3 houses. The reasons for refusal of that application are set out in paragraph 20 of the report and were based primarily on matters of an unacceptable siting and design, particularly in relation to the character of Percluan Mill. Each application should be considered on its own merits, but it is noted that the plot sizes and footprints are smaller and sited at a lower elevation to the road and generally relating better to the existing cluster at Percluan Mill. And this was a plan which was submitted by the applicant to show a comparison of the footprints existing at Percluan Mill and those proposed. So the existing ones are on the left-hand side and proposed on the right. This is basically just to show that they are of a similar or potentially smaller size footprint than those that are existing, and also have a kind of an irregular shape to them as well. So this is the elevations of plot 1. So the front elevation is to the top left. Generally, this is a 1.5 storey design based on a traditional form with a mix of masonry and timber cladding to the walls with a stone base course and a slate roof. And plot 2, similar materials to plot 1, but with different features and a slightly different design and appearance. And plot 3, again, with masonry and timber clad walls, stone base course and chimney stack, but with a slightly different configuration again. This just shows the garage which is proposed to each of the plots. Moving on to some photos of the site. This is a Google Street View image from 2009, just showing the recently developed Percluan Mill development on the left-hand side. Percluan House is in the foreground and Percluan Cottage in the background, and the mill building is behind. You can't quite see it there. And the application site is to the right-hand side of the road. So that the proposed houses, I should say, do have a similar design and appearance to those houses, with particularly in terms of the materials, with the rendered walls and the timber clad features on it as well. And this is looking back in other directions, so Percluan Mill on the right-hand side and the application site on the left-hand side. And this is looking up towards the existing woodland, which it's proposed to supplement with additional planting. And panning around, just noting the gradient of the site as well. And further to right-hand side. This is looking along the road with the site to the right-hand side. The proposal would be to lower the hedge to 1 metre so that it's within the visibility space. And looking the other way, Precluan Mill on the right-hand side and vegetation which has matured since the 2009 images, which now screens most of the Precluan Mill development. And Precluan Cottage on the right-hand side, you can see how much the vegetation has grown since 2009. So I think that's all the photographs. Yep. As explained within the report, the Precluan Mill was considered to be a cluster in accordance with LDP policy Res 5 due to it being a clearly defined group of 6 houses and therefore a suitably sited and designed addition of up to 3 may be acceptable in principle under this policy. The revised proposal, which is before you, adds 3 houses to the opposite side of the public road from Precluan Mill, which accords with Res 5 as an acceptable addition. The revised proposal was considered to be an acceptable siting and design, which has respect to the scale, character, design, and design of the existing cluster and the scale of it as well. This is now considered to be in accordance with Res 5 and the development plan as a whole. The recommendation takes account of representations, consultation responses and other material considerations. The material considerations includes LDP2, which is the Council agreed to adopt on the 22nd of February. As a result, LDP2 now holds significant weight as a whole. As explained, however, in paragraph 128, LDP2 policy RH3 directs housing proposals to rural clusters, and therefore the principle of development within clusters remains. The main difference is that the development within clusters under RH3 is only acceptable if it is within an identified cluster. It's proposed that clusters will be identified within supplementary guidance. However, this guidance is still to be published, consulted on and adopted. Very little weight can therefore be attributed to policy RH3 despite the status of the new LDP now, and it is the currently adopted LDP policy at Res 5 which should be given greater weight in this instance. It's also noted that 18 representations were received, and these are summarised and addressed at page 11 onwards. In summary, it is recommended that the committee approve the application subject to the conditions which are set out in pages 62 to 67. These conditions include the requirement for further details of surface water drainage, construction traffic management, restriction on construction hours, further details on biodiversity enhancements and landscaping. Condition 15 also seeks to relocate the garage, which is shown at plot 3. This was considered to be slightly inappropriate because it was to the front of the house, so that can easily be addressed by condition. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. We're going to move on to part 2 of the hearing procedure. That's the part where the objectors and all their agents will present their objections to the committee in support of their written objections. I think there's going to be 2 speakers representing the objectors. So as Cheryl outlined, it's going to give you 30 minutes between the 2 of you. And I'm going to call up Mark Preston first. And Mark, once you've gave your presentation, I'll open up to the members to ask you any questions. If you just stay in position at that point. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, good. Thank you. Firstly, let me thank the committee for this opportunity to address them. I'm Mark Preston. I've been fortunate enough to live at Willow House in Precluan Mill for over 10 years now in the community. A couple of points really before I start. I'm going to cover the sort of HSE aspects or concerns that we have as a community with regard to this development. And then Greta is going to cover more of the technical planning stuff, which I don't know so much about. So that's how we're going to structure this. Hopefully it won't take 30 minutes. So I beg your indulgence. Firstly, I'd just like to say that 38 years in an operational safety role in the oil industry has taught me many lessons. One of the most important lessons I have is that 99.9% of the time that I reviewed something that was written relating to a project or a development in the field, as we called it, the details in this were very rarely ever correct, or very rarely ever covered all of the problems that you'd find when we went in the field. And so I used to take, the view that in order to understand something, I had to see it in reality. And this is very much a case with this application here. Without seeing the locale in reality, it's very difficult to extrapolate from this piece of paper and a few drawings what it means in reality. I also understand that there's been various departments of EAC looking at this and now feeding into the planning committee. I think this is very difficult because, you have a whole lot of disparate views and it's very difficult to reconcile everything into a full picture and a picture that actually relates to the situation on the ground. So given this, my recommendation would be strongly to visit the site before you make a final decision and actually see what it actually looks like on the ground and the difficulties that are present at the site. So the objections that we've raised, 18 of them, include many detailed points. As I say, Greta's going to cover some of the technical stuff. I'm going to focus on the HSE side. And our main concern on HSE is, of course, the road. The U745, which is a third-class road, runs past the development. And as you saw from the photos there, runs past, the current development and the proposed new development. It's a single track road with a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit. Cars and agricultural vehicles regularly use excessive speed on this road for the road conditions. It's basically a rat run between the B742 and the A713. People, particularly coming from Dunmellinton, use it to zip up the hill and take a shortcut. The road surface is in extremely poor condition. And water is present on a regular basis. Water runs down the hill, basically. Why does this occur? It's the drains on the sides of the road, the open drains and the pipe drains are collapsed on a regular basis by large agricultural vehicles, i.e. big tractors mainly. We have had those drains repaired numerous times and they're just collapsed again. So the drainage is zero, if not non-existent in places on the road. Parts of the road flood, as you know, there's a steeper floodplain in it. So the end of the road and nearest the Rimple, that section to the west of the proposed new development floods. So it's regularly under 6 inches of water when it rains heavy and the burn bursts its bank. The whole place is liable to freezing in the winter. There are no grit boxes. There were grit boxes, but they were taken away. So we have no way of gritting the hill or making it safe. So it's basically an ice rink when you come down there and it freezes. The proposed development, as you saw from the pictures, lies on approximately 100 metres of this road between the two sharp bends that you saw. Bend to the left up the hill towards Hollybush, bend to the downside towards the Rimple. So 100 metres between two sharp bends. There are already 4 entrances and exits to the road at that point. 2 residential, 2 agricultural. This development would add a further 2 to that 100-metre stretch of road, making 6 in total. In fact, it would look more like a residential street rather than a piece of country road. And as you know, residential streets generally have a speed limit of 20 to 30 miles an hour. The stopping distance, as I'm sure you all know, at 60 miles an hour is 73 metres. 18 metres of which is thinking time, 55 metres is for the vehicle to stop. That's, of course, on a dry road with good surface conditions, neither of which exist on the U745, sorry. So it's very unlikely that anybody travelling at speed coming down this hill or indeed along the road round the bend quickly can actually stop in time before it reaches one of these entrances. Both the proposed new entrances are less than 50 metres from each of the bends. And as you know, a collision at 60 miles an hour is pretty serious. Given all these points and this section of road, the increase in traffic, firstly from construction and then from the use of the 3 large houses, is going to increase the likelihood of accident on that road. And it's only a matter of time. We've had a few near misses. And as we know, the thing about risk is you can work out the consequence, which a crash at 60 miles an hour would be quite serious. What you can't do is work out the probability, because it could happen next year, could happen tomorrow morning. So that's a bit about the condition and layout of the road. Access to the road itself is problematic as well, access to the U745. It's obvious to say that any parking during construction, and we know construction people, contractors park wherever they can, any parking in that single road trap road would block it. Also, we have real concerns about access onto the road. Both ends of that road are problematic. The junctions, if you know, the junction between the 745, U745, and the 713, the main road, is a really strangely designed junction. But the junction from the B742, the Dalrymple Road, onto the U745 is particularly problematic. There's been numerous accidents at the end of the road, at the Dusty Hall Bridge, as we call it. And in fact, the parapet of the bridge is currently cracked and demolished after being hit again by another car, another accident. There are no road signs on the B742, the Dalrymple Road, to indicate there is a minor road there in either direction. Travelling from the Ayr direction down the B742, it's a very sharp left-hand turn into the U745, and large vehicles have to swing into the middle of the road to obviously to take the turning, larger lorries, etc. Now, that's problematic in itself, but it's really problematic because some 15 metres further on, there is a blind, what would be a left-hand bend coming from Dalrymple. And so lorries and traffic are swinging out into the middle of the road to turn and are being faced by head-on cars. Coming the other way from Dalrymple, you come round the sharp left-hand bend, 90-degree blind bend, and to turn into the U45, you then stop 15 metres later, sit in the middle of the road, or sit on your side of the road, and swing across. Cars coming around that bend quite often, come up against cars sitting in the middle of the road. So both access points to the road are extremely problematic. No signage, no indication there could be traffic, stationary traffic in the road, and it causes real problems. It causes accidents. That's why there's so many accidents at the Dusty Hall Bridge. And I assume that your roads person has looked at this and is familiar with this area. So increasing the traffic in any way during construction or indeed occupancy will only add to that, and it'll only add to the probability that there's going to be a serious incident. That's access. So, if the application was to be approved, there really needs to be major consideration given to permanent traffic measures on this road, because it's just not going to work otherwise. And also, we've noted that the plans submitted show an agricultural access up the side of one of the houses for tractors into the remainder of the field. So how's that going to work? It's going to run over drains and whatever. And why should that access be there? Why can that be not on a safer part of the road further down? Small point, but again, important. I'd like to move on quickly now to cover health. We've seen no sign of a construction plan covering things like dust, noise, of course, road congestion, light intrusion, road cleaning, because we know in a construction site, muck is dragged onto the road. It's a single track road, there's no way to avoid it. So how's all that going to be dealt with? We also note that I've said anybody parks on the road, it's going to block it. There needs to be a construction laydown area and a parking area for contractors while they're building the houses. If generators are used on site, how are those going to work? There needs to be safeguards put around them for noise, earthing, leakage of fuel, etc. And finally, in health, the road is actually used by residents for recreation. People walk dogs. People from out with the area walk dogs, because there's no other recreational space really at Buccleuch Mill. And so you've got walkers, cyclists, and residents, using that road on foot. Again, with a 60 mile an hour limit, blind bends, sharp bends, and poor road surface. If these people were hit by a car, then the consequences would be, I think, serious. Environment, can I cover now quickly? Flooding. I've read through the design statement. It says it's not going to add any water to any water. And then in the other section, it says it's going to put water into the burn. So it's not going to add any additional water, but it's going to put water into the burn. Strange. I'm an engineer. I don't understand that. And secondly, the point they're proposing to put the water into the burn is an area where it's flooded. And the pipe that they're proposing to use at the moment is collapsed because it's been run over by a tractor and is repeatedly run over by tractors. So it's never going to stay in one place, in one piece. Well, at least I don't understand how it's never been in one piece in the 10 years I've been there. Wildlife, there is also, quite a lot of wildlife in that field. We see things like deer, hares, badgers, buzzards, woodpeckers, swallows, which use the field for nesting, breeding, and it's also a break zone from the road. From the current tree line to the road, the field acts as a break that these animals can use. So again, that would all be lost during construction and, for some part when the houses were built. So that's basically the points I wanted to cover. But the real concern is road safety for myself, the other residents, my grandkids, etc., due to the volume of traffic that will be in place once this development was completed, were it to be completed. So I would encourage the committee to carefully consider these points, because they're not in here, and they're not really in any of the submissions that I've heard so far. So please consider them carefully. I'm going to hand over to Greta now, but I would say just consider this carefully, and in terms of this really inappropriate, dominating, and unsafe nature of this development as proposed. So thank you for your time, and I'll hand over to Greta now.
Thanks, Mark. At this point, I'm going to open up to members.
Oh, sorry.
Any
Sorry.
questions for
Forgot that bit.
Yep, it's okay. Members, do you have any questions for Mark? Don't see any online, so I think you're getting off with this one, Mark. Thanks.
Am I? Oh, God. Off lightly.
So,
Off
Yep.
lightly. Okay.
okay, could I ask,
Okay, you finished? Yeah.
thanks. If you just return to the public gallery, thanks. And can I ask Greta to come forward?
Yeah.
Now, Greta, Mark's used almost exactly 15 minutes, so 15 minutes left.
Good morning. I'm Greta Roberts, helping to represent the happy family so far at Percluan. I thought I would just have 5 minutes, and I was going to try and, with difficulty, to keep to that. But if I've got a little longer, I would just like to say that I'm sorry that your photographs of the site really didn't do it justice, and I hope some of you have managed to visit it. Mind you, Mark may have put you off because of danger of death on the road. But rest assured, if you don't know the area, it is a little jewel down near Dalrymple. The little mill buildings cluster restored and rebuilt mainly, but they're very much established together. As you may know, Burns was associated with it, as he is with a lot of places, but he was friendly with someone who worked at the mill. There's a Roman road going north and south there, which should be very interested to hear how excavations and investigations go on that. Even the road, in Roman times, they had defensive boundaries around settlements, and I'm glad that planning legislation has them in as well, although you're a bit short of supplementary planning guidance on clusters. Anyhow, good morning to you all. Our reasons for refusal could refer to the Council's previous refusal last April. Little has changed since then. The supplementary planning guidance on clusters has yet to appear, which will actively identify sites which they, the planners, consider to be most appropriate for expansion in relation to access to services, transport and landscape impacts. Currently, guidance and siting of houses in the countryside is based on the Design Guide of Rural Housing and Policies on Rural Development Placemaking 2. Why should you refuse this new application? Firstly, location and siting. Percluan is an existing tightly knit cluster of 5 houses, replacing much of the original historic mill buildings beside the Lade. It is a separate entity with no gaps to fill. The road is a defensible boundary, as is the stream and Lade coming down one side of the original mill building and then parallel to the road out to the west. The proposed houses are not near the road. They are approximately 30 metres back from the road and materially higher up. The Suds Pond and suburban access loops dislocate the buildings from the Percluan cluster. I'm still very confused, as you may be, about the access points. 1 or 2 access points into this development, which sadly we've not got a plan up on now. ARA seem very confused as to whether there should be 1 access point or 2, but 2 are shown on the plan, as Mark referred to. The current red line site for the 3 houses that you've seen is 3 times the size at Percluan. It covers the whole field. Even your planners agree it is too large. There is no justification for including the rest of the field as required for drainage improvement. Sorting out already blocked field drainage does not need planning consent. Including the whole field means that there is no proper defensible boundary around the 3 houses and Suds Pond. it is required to be put round house plots, particularly at the west. Otherwise, there's scope for future sporadic development there. Incidentally, the west end of the field, this bit that's for drainage improvement, is now protected as being locally important. A recommendation the reporter considered in LPD2, and which the council appear to have accepted. I'm very pleased about that, because we have a lot of not terribly high grade agricultural lands in East Ayrshire, but land which is locally important and often has particularly good habitats because it's not intensively cultivated. Trees are proposed towards the top of the field, up to towards the south, to compensate for using greenfield land in this planning application. But this is valued as part of the Percluan Mill setting, and as I mentioned, also for wildlife, for foraging, and a pathway for animals, bats, beasts, and insects down to the stream, particularly for the many rare bats in the woods behind, which you'll see one of the residents at Percluan has taken an interest in and done some research on. As roe deer and hares regularly graze, very high deer fencing will be required for these gardens and to protect the proposed amenity planting, thus breaking the functioning of a valued green network. 2, the council's design guidance poses the following. Will this development enhance the character and amenity of the area? How can it create a clear sense of place in a large field? Does it consider the views and integrate with the landscape to avoid over-prominent development? This development would be a suburban enclave in a sloping field with incongruous impact on a peaceful local landscape character and on nature. Halfway through. In terms of NPF and Res 1 and SS2 overarching local plan vision, it would be inappropriate. This would be an inappropriate incursion into the countryside, and it would not contribute to good placemaking. I called it last year and call it again, the proposed development, a prominent carbuncle on the opposite side of the road from a clearly defined self-contained cluster. But East Ayrshire Council didn't comment on that, but they did call Percluan itself as tightly knit last year. Now, in section 97 in your report, your planners admit that siting south of the public road here is, I quote, Shall I continue? It was not I, as they say.
Something went wrong with my laptop there, so apologies.
Right. Now, in section 97 of your planning report, your planners admit that the siting south of the public road here is, I quote, unusual for a cluster extension, but this separation, and I quote again, albeit a little removed, would, they think, keep the historic mill distinct. So we go back to what is a cluster. On page 45 of their report, they accept that Percluan is an existing, clearly defined group exhibiting strong proximal visual relationships with its dwellings, which I suppose means a cluster. In terms of R5 rural housing, last year planners described Percluan as being all on the same axis, which adds, I quote, which adds to their relationship as a cohesive group. Page 44, that siting on the south of the south side of the road is not the preferred option for an extension to an existing cluster. And I read that in black and white. They faintly also discerned an element of relationship with a cluster, albeit on the other side of the road. This application cannot comply with Res 5. It is not infill, but a linear expansion beyond a defined cluster. As sporadic new housing in the countryside, it's not consistent with Res 2 or 3 or Res 4 compact growth. NPF policies are now reflected in the local development plan, but NPP4 is clear on environmental requirements. For example, in NPP4, Policy 3, Enhancing Biodiversity, we question mitigation proposed by planting trees, which will require high deer fencing if the trees are not to be eaten, and trees which will take time to grow. I think, as all planners know, just add a bit of greenery, say there's a lighting problem or something is going to be too obtrusive, just put a bit of greenery up the front on the plans and it looks so much better, it integrates it. And then you think, how long will it take to grow? Will it be of any height before the life of the houses is over? Policy 4 and 5 in NPP4 is useful too. It covers natural places and sustainability. And Policy 9 criteria to avoid greenfield sites is not met either. The local development plan was moderately green, but it was interesting that when the national planning framework was sort of taken into account, the reporter looking at our local development plan changed things like low carbon to net zero. So greenness is really, and I presume or assume the council have accepted that, but it shows that we really have to be very careful with our environment. It's very precious, not just because of flooding and such like, but anyhow, towards the end now, the planners accept that there are what they call policy tensions about accessibility here. Building large family houses on a greenfield site, remote from services, shops, schools and transport along narrow rural roads. Building 3 houses here will not provide the qualities of successful places in a field 2 miles from Dalrymple. They will alter the historic and scenic character of Percluan, its local distinctiveness and amenity, and to increase traffic on a road used by walkers and cyclists when it's not flooded. I noticed too that in the local development plan, there's another policy, DES 1, is added to the reasons for refusal for you to take on board. This siting is basically neither safe nor coherent and does not respect the existing cluster. Please refuse this development.
Thank you very much, Greta. I'm going to open up to members for, if you have any questions for Greta. There's no one in the room, not online. Okay, thanks very much, Greta. If you just return to the public gallery. The next part in the procedure, we're going to hear from the applicant, who will have a total of 15 minutes. Thank you.
As you are aware, this is a resubmission of a previous application submitted in 2022, which was refused. The principle of the development was acceptable under that application, but the planners felt that the design did not comply with policy. In this submission, we have redesigned the development to address the comments from both the planning team and the objectors regarding the scale and mass and design of the development. The outcome is a smaller, less intrusive and more interesting development. The improvement to the design has been outlined by the planners in their report, and as a result, this application has been recommended for approval with conditions. The main objections, as you've heard, raised by the current residents at Percluan Mill relate to road safety, drainage and biodiversity, all of which are addressed in the report. One of the main issues raised is road safety. As you could see from the photographs produced by the planning team, the visibility, there's quite high hedges round about Percluan Mill at the moment. The visibility will be improved by the development as we reduce the hedgerows round about, and this will improve the overall road safety at the development as it stands at the moment. The hedges are currently very, very high next to the existing houses, and the visibility from the access points to Percluan Mill is poor. If the hedges were maintained below the 1 metre as is proposed with
the proposed development, then perhaps the road conditions would be much safer. The visibility will improve, the road safety will improve with the development. Another point that was raised was the drainage. I'm not proposing to introduce new water to the public road. The water is there, the rain is there. It's an issue. It has been an issue for a number of years. I lived at Percloon Mill for 18 years and it was an issue then. It's an issue now. It was Scotland, it rains. What we propose to do within the development is we propose to try and reduce the flow of water to the public road from the field. At the moment, there will be points where the water will flow onto the road. We are proposing to fix that within the development. The other point raised is the biodiversity. The field is currently used for silage. I think you saw in the photographs there. It was getting cut for silage when that photograph was taken. This happens twice a year during the summer, making it a grazing area only for wildlife. Once the development is complete, there will be limited disruption to the ground out with the garden areas, and this will create new environments for animals to inhabit rather than just visit. Further to this, the surface water pond will provide another habitat for wildlife. The overall biodiversity of the site will be improved by the development, and this is noted in the report prepared by the planners. The development will have a positive impact on road safety. It will help to manage the surface water, which isn't being managed at the moment, and the biodiversity will be improved greatly, and it should be supported. As I mentioned, the only reason for refusal in the previous application was that the design did not comply with policy, but the principle of the development was acceptable. We feel we have dramatically improved the design to provide a unique and interesting development which reflects and complements the existing Percloon Mill hamlet. Each proposed house is unique. Each one is inspired by the existing house types of Percloon Mill in scale, style, detailing and material finishes, but each has its own individual design, designs which comply with the rural housing design guidance. The site layout has been directly inspired by the existing development at Percloon Mill. The proposed houses have been positioned in an L-shape arrangement to face onto the proposed soakaway pond. This creates an area of open space in front of the new houses, much like the existing layout of Percloon Mill. One of the points that's been raised is about the red line boundary. Now, originally, on the original submission, the red line was included the whole field. This was mainly till I was to address the drainage issues. And to be honest with you, this time the red line was retained the same because the site boundary had to be the same as the original application. So there is no intention to develop this land further, and any development would have to go through planning again. So the proposal, as shown, is what we are proposing to do. There is no intention to further develop to the east of the west of the field. Further to this, we are proposing to plant trees in some of the land that surrounds the housing sites. Tree planting will be between the garden areas and Potterson Wood, and it will provide a backdrop to the development. And as the planting matures, you see what a difference it makes when the planting matures, because the two photographs that you saw of Percloon Mill when it was first completed in 2009, and now you see such a difference in how that planting has masked and allowed that development to settle into its environment. We are hoping, and it should happen, that our development will do the same. When Percloon Mill Farm was first developed in 2008, it changed from old ruined buildings and agricultural sheds to large family homes. It has continued to change and develop since. The proposed extension to the existing cluster is the next stage of development and is supported by policy. Considering this, I ask the committee members to support the planning officer's recommendation for approval. All I can say is that the reasons raised by the objectors are understandable, but I've identified in the documents provided that a lot of the issues will actually be improved with the development being there. The development will provide good-sized family homes to meet varying and changing needs of householders. And it should be supported.
Thank you very much, Donna. Members, do you have any questions for Donna? No, Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask the applicant what's the intended doing with the spoil? I believe the houses are getting lowered into the ground. If that's the case, what kind of height would be the retaining walls at the back of maybe possibly house 2? And the maintenance of the hedges, who would take care of that as well over the years to keep it down at a metre high?
So the spoil, we would hope to try and do a bit of cut and fill across the site. So we would hope to limit the amount of spoil from the site. This would mean that there would be areas that we could, where certain areas will be raised up and certain areas will be dropped down to allow to have some level access at the back, but also the ground will be graded up at the back. There will be small retaining walls. We're hoping that these will only be about 1 metre to 1.5 metres. So yeah, it should allow that some good garden ground, but also we should be able to balance the cut and fill across the site. That's all something that we're going to look at once we get into more detail with the application.
And the hedges?
On the hedges, it'll be maintained by a factor.
Thank you.
Very happy with that. Councillor Filson. Councillor Watts, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. You bear in mind the width of the road. You stated in what you obviously submitted to us that the development will improve the road safety. Can you go into a little more detail on how the development is going to improve road safety? Bearing in mind that the width of the road, really looking at it, at most places you just get one car down at a time. So how is it going to improve road safety?
The main reason that it'll improve road safety is due to the visibility. You can see from the photographs, there was a photograph that was shown during the planner's presentation, that there are quite high hedges on both sides of the road. When we develop this site, the visibility we have visibility displays that we have to have in place under the conditions that are recommended on this application. So the visibility, the hedges have to be below 1 metre and they have to be kept below 1 metre. That is how we hope that the visibility will improve the road safety. You will be, when you come out of the development, looking both to east and west, there are, as mentioned by Mark, there is a corner at one at the east and a corner at the west, and the visibility displays do fall within the land ownership, and therefore it allows us to be able to maintain the hedges below that 1 metre. So it should improve the visibility, because you will, when you're coming from Dalrymple towards the development, you can't see around the corner. That whole hedge at that point will be taken down below 1 metre, so you will be able to see traffic coming down the hill from the east. So that's how I see it improving. There is just at the moment the hedges are very high on both sides of the road. So by taking away the hedge that sits around the corner, I think if you look back at the map where the floodplain corner is, the area of risk, that corner there, that hedge has to drop below 1 metre as required by the conditions on the application. So that will allow the road safety to improve dramatically.
You all good, Councillor Watts, with that response? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Hogg? Thanks.
Thanks. Can I refer to the Burcloon burn? Once the houses are built, obviously there'll be drives, etc., that will have kind of hard surfaces. This year in Dalrymple, the Burcloon burn has flooded in more than 1 or 2 occasions. So if we're going to put excess water into Burcloon burn, there is a knock-on effect into the local village of excess water and flooding. How would this be negated?
On the proposals, you will notice that to the west of the development, in the area that I've included to allow us to address flooding, there's an area for attenuation. And what attenuation does is it reduces the flow of the water into the burn. So it means that this hull has to be designed and detailed to comply with the conditions of an approval. But basically it means the flow rate of the water has to be reduced so that any water at the moment that's coming off the field and going into the burn will be coming at a rate of however fast the rain is falling. Any attenuation designed it will reduce the flow of the water into the burn so that it is managed to an extent, but it will be designed by a drainage specialist, and the area at the bottom of the field, we have that area to work with to allow us to attenuate as much as we can to minimise the flow of water into the burn at the moment. We're fortunate enough to have the land area to try and deal with this. On other developments, they might not be so lucky, but in this particular development, we do have an area of land that we can essentially attenuate and slow the flow of water from the field.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? I don't see any online. Oh, thanks very much, Donna. Could you return to the public gallery? Well, that concludes the hearing process. And at this stage, I hand over to the planning department to cover any points raised or issues.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might be worth just showing the site layout again, just so that we can see some of the features that were being talked about. If you bear with me. So this is the application site, and you can see some of the objections were regarding the size of the application site. So it is a very large site, it's outlined in red. However, it's clear that the plot boundaries are those which are outlined in blue, which is a lot smaller than the application site itself. And this remaining field would remain in agricultural use. So it certainly doesn't prejudice any future proposals. It doesn't mean that there's more chance of planning permission being granted for more houses, that alone. It just simply seems to be the way that the application site's been drawn, and as the applicant says, it's based on what was previously drawn. You can also see this is the area of the suds. So it's proposed that the surface water, which would come into the plots from the field, would be trapped and drained along the boundaries, and also the surface water from the hard surfacing of the plots would also be trapped and drained. The water would go into the suds pond and then eventually drained to the burn. So ARA Flooding have been consulted on this. They are content with this, subject to the final detail of it. And the discharge rate would have to be limited to, I think it's 4.5 litres per second as a flow rate going into the burn. So I would also maybe refer you to a point that ARA had made under paragraph 32, where they said that the current proposals for a new drainage system, as stated in the surface water management plan, will reduce the discharge rate from the site alone and would significantly reduce the likelihood of runoff from the site, causing such issues. The applicant has noted the perimeter drain to the plot boundaries with the road to halt water runoff. So just some other points, just in relation to the road, perhaps ARA might want to comment further on that. However, we don't have objections from ARA in relation to the capacity or issues with the existing road. It is worth bearing in mind that what you're considering is whether there is a material impact caused by an increase in traffic from the development. Bear in mind it is a public road. It will have fairly high degree of traffic using it. Present 3 additional houses is unlikely to add to the traffic using it. Still a fairly minor increase in the amount of traffic. Just some of the points relating to parking during construction and dust and noise and so on. Those are covered by conditions. So we've got Condition 7 requires a construction traffic management plan. And it notes in it that all construction works, traffic, machinery, equipment, including delivery vehicles, shall be parked at all times within the application site. Condition 8, construction hours. So this limits the time of construction. So it's not to say that there won't be noise from construction, but it will be for a temporary period during the construction period, and it will be limited to daytime hours and just the morning of a Saturday, no work on a Sunday. Biodiversity as well. There are proposals to plant a large area of woodland, which we have said that this is we think more than satisfies the requirements for biodiversity enhancements. Condition 11 requires the full details of this. Condition 12 is regard to landscaping, so there is a bit of an overlap there, and it requires details of future maintenance, and 12B requires it to be maintained for a period of 5 years. So we would hope that if any trees were to fail, then they would be replaced. The condition 14 covers access visibility. So as applicant said, they own the land to either side of the accesses and are able to provide the visibility displays that are recommended by roads officers. And condition 17 is in relation to dust management. So we would require the submission of a dust management plan. We would consult with environmental health on that, and then the requirements of a dust management plan would require to be implemented in accordance with approved details. Just after what other points are there? It was noted that there's been little change to the refused application. In some ways this is right. It is the same application site, it's in the same general location. However, we did consider that in principle there could be an extension to the cluster under the refused application, and it was the reasons for refusal were down to the siting and design. So yes, the houses don't come right close to the road, but they're closer to the road than they were previously. They're at a lower location, a lower siting and elevation. They're smaller than what they were previously, so we don't think now that they're going to have the over-dominating effect that we thought they would have in the previous application. I think that probably covers most things that I wanted to say anyway. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
We'll just hand over to our colleagues, maybe a couple of minutes to get through that.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. Yep, the speeding on the road, if there was fatalities or near misses, we would have been notified by the Police Scotland. We haven't got any data to indicate that, but if you did mention it getting up to a speed of 60 mile an hour, I can't see it getting up to that speed, but what we can do is we can put a speed survey in. The speed survey will indicate it, and if it does see excessive speed, we can put, should the application be approved or whatever, we can put sort of traffic calming measures in. So we haven't got data to say that there's been any near misses or fatalities, but if there was any fatalities, we would have been advised by Police Scotland to put traffic calming measures in. Again, we can put a speed survey out to monitor it, and if it does no excess speeds, we can organise sort of traffic calm measures to be put in to reduce the speed. Regarding the flooding, colleague is correct. It is a positive drainage system that will reduce the flow, so we have no objections towards that. I did note up about grit boxes. We have got community grit boxes, so the community can, if you wish, apply to get the gritting boxes put out. So we comment there. But other than that, we are happy with the application. We've got no further objections. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up, yep, for discussion, comment, questions. So, Councillor Filson.
You got a couple, Chair. One for roads there. I actually missed what you said there about fatalities. Have you got any stats about the junction that the objector alluded to earlier on there between the B742 and the U745? Is there any accidents or any stats there to see how many accidents were there?
We haven't got any stats at all, but we are aware there's been some complaints, but we haven't got any stats.
Right, thanks. And one for Chair, one for the planning Chair. I've seen your photographs there. I was a bit disappointed that there was none from the site looking back towards Procloon Mill. Have you got any of them at all to show the board?
Yep, case officer saying that at the time that photographs were taken, there was silaging going on, as you would have seen from the photographs. So no, we don't have photos looking back the way towards the.
I was disappointed to see the site visit had been stood down the other day there, so I took the advantage to just nip in myself, and I left it to night time just as it was getting kind of dark, and I stood. Could you put the site up again there, please? The closer in one, if you can. The one, I think you've got one that's closer than that. No, there was one earlier on there. I think it was the one that was showing you the site before and the site now. That one. Did you bring that down a wee bit, actually? Oh, you can't do that. Well, basically, I was standing there on house number 2, and I was looking back, and the nearest cottage is Procloon Cottage there, just the one you can see just at the very top there. And I guess the lights were on them both upstairs. And I think the one to the left is actually a bathroom, and the one to the right is I think it's a bedroom with a balcony on it. I could see people in both of them. So that privacy issue was a thing for me. And that especially going at night time, that's I could see it much better when people was actually in the buildings, basically, like in their rooms.
Thanks, Chair. Procloon House added a balcony, with a kind of Juliet balcony recently, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. So they will have open views there, but as you say, they might not have curtains up at the moment because they've got no neighbours as such, but they do have a big glazed area that they can look out of.
So if I can just maybe add to that, the separation distance between the houses would be more than sufficient in any normal situation if it was an urban environment, in terms of window to window distances. So in terms of actual privacy impact, that in itself wouldn't be an issue for us. I do appreciate that will be a changed circumstance for that cottage that's there. It doesn't have a house in front of it at the moment. But in terms of the separation distances between them, that in itself is not a particular privacy matter, and we frequently consent houses within those distances. And certainly the obvious example being in a more urban type environment, that is a reasonable separation distance, even in a rural area for us in a cluster, in my opinion.
Thanks, David.
It was just an issue for me. I could see the people in the rooms actually if where I was standing. I think that's right on the middle of number 2 house there.
Thanks, Drew. Just in the site visit, Councillor Filson, that's a proposed date in the diary, and it's kept there as a holding date, and if any committee member asks for it, then we go ahead and book that, but there was no request come in, so it wasn't really stood down as such. It was rather there's no request come in. Thanks. Councillor Hogg, you want to come in?
Thank you. In relation to Procloon Mill itself, it is very much an old steading that's been done up, and it is very close together, and there are no spaces for new builds within that area. The area that you're proposing to say is an extension to the hamlet or to that area, it's essentially a new build. It's not essentially part of Procloon. What we're looking at is actually 3 new builds which are purporting to be part of Procloon Mill, but they're separated by a road, and there are clearly definitions there. So it's really difficult to say that it is part of Procloon. It really is part of a new build. So I would suggest that a site visit would perhaps be in order so that people could get a handle on exactly the layout of this? Because it is at this moment agricultural land. From the B742, there will be a visual impact on the rural area. And as I say, I don't see it being part of Preclude. I see it being 3 new build houses.
And I would second that, Chair.
So, Councillor Hogg, you were asking for a site visit, and Councillor Filson, you. So we've got that on the table at the moment.
Chair.
Yep.
Why was there no visit? Nobody wanted to go. So nobody wanted to go. Why do you want to go now?
Yeah, the proposed date was in the diary, and there was no request, but there is always an option if there's what people hearing during this committee meeting that they require further information. We could all. It is disappointing that we didn't do it before, but we can accommodate it. I just legal maybe what come in at that.
Thank you, Chair. That's absolutely right. As members are aware, in advance of any planning committee, we do have a standing date normally in the diary a few days before that members, if they feel that they wish a site visit, any member of the planning committee can request that site visit for a particular item. We are aware that in terms of this particular committee, that no members of the planning committee asked for a site visit. That said, members, even at this stage, are not precluded if they feel now that we've gone through the hearing procedure, you've read the papers, you've heard from parties present, that you still do feel that you would wish a site visit, then obviously it's an informal part of the process. But members can, if they wish, look to do so as a means of further, informing their decision prior to moving to determination. So to that extent, while there are dates in the diary, members can still, should they be so minded at this stage, seek one, and it is ultimately a matter for members.
Thanks, Craig. I'm going to take Councillor Maben first, then.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have enough information here. The planning, the detail is quite enough. I don't believe a site visit is required. I would think we should be moving to decision. It's my opinion.
Thanks, Councillor Maben. Councillor Lennox, you want to go on?
Thanks, Chair. Just for clarity, maybe one for Craig. If we were to go ahead with and do a subsequent site visit, would any member not attending that site visit be precluded from making any decision at a later date?
Obviously, it's not like the LRB, which is a formal part of the process. But what I would probably say is if you've gone in a site visit, I think, in all honesty, I think you would probably be better it would be better and probably you would be still locked into the process. So I think in that regard, my initial view would be those in the site visit would be the ones that probably, to be fair, the difficulty you also have, Councillor Lennox, is we've just gone through a hearing process. So the members that have been present at this committee have actually heard the objectors as well. So I think, to be fair, it's the members who have attended today actually that are locked into the process, because you've heard the objectors. Any other members who perhaps came along who had apologies today have not had the benefit necessarily of hearing that and being involved. So I would say it'd be these members today that probably would have to come back and deal with that at a later date.
Thanks, Craig. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I would agree with Councillor Maben. I don't necessarily think we need to have a site visit. We've looked at previous applications, obviously of this site. We've heard the hearing process today. I think we have, I mean, I've certainly got a handle of the area. I do have major concerns with the road. I don't think that road is really wide enough. So I think, yes, we probably could move to some form of determination today, to be fair.
Yep. Thanks. So we have a proposal for a site visit from Councillor Hogg and seconded by, okay, before I go on there, I'm just going to, I've got another question.
Just in case we're going to go to a vote here, I need some clarification. If we go to the vote, is that the end of the hearing? Because I've still got some questions to ask, and we're trying to follow a hearing procedure here, and here we're moving to some determination that's a site visit, which was already in the diary. Nobody asked to go on the site visit. It wasn't stood down, it was just Cheryl indicated there was no site visit because nobody requested it. Now, I'm no bothered one way or the other if we decide to have a site visit. I'm neither here nor there about it. But I would still like to ask the questions that I've got, listening to the objectors and the applicant, because that's part of the hearing process. So I wouldn't like the hearing curtailed, the new. So I just need some clarity on that. What is the legal position with this? Because we're at a hearing. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, we are actually still at the stage of, questions by members, but we have obviously a competent motion before us. What I would probably suggest is if we park the motion and then we can invite, if there are any other contrary motions, we can park that just now and come back to that. If members still have particular questions or require further clarifications, we can revisit that once all members' questions have been addressed. So we'll come back to the motions, I think, if that assists. Councillor McGee.
Yeah, thanks for that good advice there, Craig. So, Councillor McGee, do you have questions to raise? Thanks.
I do have some questions. I just needed some clarity. Okay, it was stated, and I've got 2 or 3 questions, but I just want to ask them one at a time, so I don't want them all kind of bundled in together. The principle of development was accepted previously, is my understanding, but the houses were too high up in the hill. They had an overbearing, I think, outlook on the rest of the development. But I would just ask for some clarity on clusters. So my understanding is that the proposed dwelling can be sustainably accommodated within or immediately adjoining the identified cluster boundary. The cluster should not exceed a total of 15 residential units. So I'm just wondering, and this might be my ignorance, I always thought like a cluster, say there was 3 houses in a row, you could add another couple of houses onto them, or 4, right? So we've got a number of houses at Perclown Mill, but there's like a boundary. Ken, that road I would say was like a natural boundary, but now what we've done, we're going to cross the road altogether. Now, is that an addition to an existing cluster? Because to me, it's out with the boundary of that existing cluster, and in following that party on, would it in fact be possible that this new development could then be considered in the future a cluster with possible further development to it? Because that would need to come before a planning committee, and they've all got to be judged on their own merits. I understand all that, but I think this is like the cumulative effect. We've got to be able to foresee, Ken, this is what we are proposing today, or what's proposed. And so I just want some clarity on clusters and future development. Thank you. And I've got another couple of questions after that.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Councillor McGee, it's not usual to go across a kind of physical boundary, such as a burn or a road in this instance. And usually we would prefer, if there was an extension to an existing cluster of at least 4 houses that are existing, that it's tagged on either side or behind, or so on, and that it fits geographically, if you like. In this case, there isn't any real leeway in the site at Percloon on the north side of the U745 to do that because of the burn in the Lade. But although we look at sites on an individual basis or applications on an individual basis, in this case, we felt we could have 3 on the other side. We wouldn't always do that, you know, it would be a case by case basis. But in this case, we thought that would be the most appropriate siting for it, which would also leave Percloon Mill as a separate entity in terms of its wider landscape and historic appeal as a kind of Burns associated development. So it could still, you could still say there was additional houses nearby, but you could view Percloon Mill as a whole. However, the new one, if approved, wouldn't constitute a cluster in its own right because there's only 3 houses in it. So you need 4 for an existing cluster.
Thanks for that. So,
sorry, Councillor, I'll just maybe clarify. I think Marian's right, the 3 wouldn't be a cluster, but if you took the whole selection, we are saying that this is a cluster type development. So you would have the 6 existing plus these 3, which would then make 9. I think perhaps your question is, could we then add 50% to that in the future? Potentially, if that's where policy direction took us. As matters stand, it's not, and there are also time limits in terms of the houses would have to be built before it would constitute a cluster to do. So we could never rule out that there wouldn't be additional houses in the future. But I think, like you alluded to yourself, it would be taken on its own merits at the time under whatever policy regime was in place at the time. So adding these 3 doesn't immediately guarantee that there'll be another addition of X number of houses in the future. But we also couldn't rule that out. It would depend on the policy regime in the future, but at the moment that wouldn't happen.
just going to follow us through, and this isn't a criticism of the planners. I'm just trying to get mine head round about this. So if we agree that this is part of a cluster and the 3 additional houses, so that makes 9 in total, I think. So there could be a further 6 to make it up to 15. That's me. That's without taking my shoes and socks off to count that all together. So I'm just, my question is that no a kind of loose interpretation of RH3? Because it seems a kind of loose interpretation of it to me as a layperson, kind of low part of the planning committee.
We're still with RE5 at the moment in LDP1, the 2017 plan. We're not putting a lot of weight on the new cluster policy in LDP2 because it doesn't have its associated supplementary guidance yet. But you're right in terms of you could, your fear would be that it would mushroom another 50% again, 50% again, but it's actually restricted to every plan period. So it's under Res 5, the current policy. So what you would get be a 50% extension in theory in every plan period up to a maximum of 15. So you can't just say, you know, we're coming into a new plan, we'll get this at the start of the plan, we'll get 50%, and then 2 years later we'll try for another 50%. So there are kind of checks and balances in the existing policy.
Just wanted to come in again just to make another point that we're saying it's under Res 5 at the moment. So the current LDP, new LDP will identify clusters. So we wouldn't actually be allowing, you know, we wouldn't be able to sort of make our own judgment. Any, you know, when an application came in, what would be a cluster, what isn't, that would be set out in the supplementary guidance when that comes in. So the supplementary guidance will go out to public consultation. So that's what will determine what will be the clusters, rather than any judgment on our part.
Draw a boundary around them now.
Well, maybe we should wait in the supplementary guidance, and that's my initial thought to that. But that's the other part, and thanks very much for my education on clusters and that. Just, it was a point that was brought up previously. I think it was Councillor Folson brought it up, but the hedges gone to 1 metre. Councillor Folson asked who would maintain this, and if it was stated, it would be a factor. Now, what happens if the factor doesn't maintain that? Ken, is there a legal way we can put that into action? Because you can that As councillors, every councillor have had complaints about high hedges and trees and different things. And I'm just wondering, kind of the work up back down to a metre and the next thing, 5 years' time, kind of our ground out the road and all the rest of it. I'm just wondering who can ensure that is in fact, is indeed the case. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, and I'm conscious David Wilson will also probably want to come in this. In terms of factoring agreements are normally brought in the back of the title deed position. So I would expect the developer to be ensuring that any requirements for factors are enshrined within the title deeds of each of the new 3 house properties. Now, within that, there's normally considerable lengthy clauses relating to, the appointment of factors, when factors can or can't be appointed, or for that matter, if folk are not happy with their factors, what they can also do. But I would expect that to form part of the title deed position when the properties are sold, and that will set out for the new homeowners, if members were to approve this, for the homeowners what they required to do in appointing factors, and also if they're not happy with their factors, what they can do. So in a sense, that is a private law matter that will ultimately have to take place between the owners and their factors. In terms of any arrangements, either to ensure the factors are doing their job or what's to happen if they're not happy that the factors clearly aren't doing their job. And as you're aware, Councillor McGee, this is we also know that this happens as well throughout the district, where a number of homeowners, over the last few years have indicated their displeasure with factors. But it is essentially a private law matter that they would have to address, and the basis of that would be through their title deeds.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Craig's absolutely right there. The control over it in the longer term is through planning condition 14, where there's a stipulation that that's maintained going forward. So if it's not maintained, then the council can take enforcement action through those conditions to enforce compliance with the conditions. So the conditions are worded in an expectation that that will happen for the lifetime of the development. If there's any failure in that, that would be a breach of the planning condition, and the council's planning department have got the right to enforce against that condition to ensure compliance takes place. So that's the hopeful comfort in the longer term, that the hedges will be maintained to maintain the sightlines in a safe manner.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any further questions before we return to the motions that are on the table? No, I don't see any. So keep me right here, but we had a proposal from Councillor Hogg, seconded by Councillor Filson for a site visit. We had a counter motion from Councillor Mabin. Now, Councillor Watts, I don't know if you officially seconded that.
Yes, I can do, yes.
And obviously the contents of that amendment, Chair, are just to proceed to determine the application today based upon the information that's been discussed.
Thanks, Chair. So we'll do this through roll call because there's a couple of members online. So just to reiterate the motion, proposed by Councillor Jennifer Hogg and seconded by Councillor Drew Filson to go for a site visit. And the amendment proposed by Councillor Peter Mabin and seconded by Councillor Neil Watts to not go for a site visit and determine the application today. So if I call your name, can you let me know if you're for the motion or the amendment, please? Councillor Graham Barton.
Yeah, for the amendment.
Councillor John McGee.
For the motion.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
Motion.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Motion.
Councillor William Lennox.
Motion.
Councillor Billy Crawford. Councillor Neil Watts.
Amendment.
Councillor Drew Filson.
Motion.
Councillor Jennifer Hogg. So just to confirm that for 6 votes for the motion and 3 votes for the amendment, the decision is to go for a site visit.
You never called me. I would be for the amendment.
Apologies, councillor, maybe I've missed you. So you're for the amendment. So it's
Lane Stewart. Lane Stewart was on.
she's dropped off the call. She left at
Name
11. So that's 6 votes to 4, and it would still be site visit decision.
So that concludes this part of the agenda. So we'll decide to go for a site visit, which will be arranged in due course.
Chair, I accept that. But if folk are wanting site visits, they can do that, they're individuals. They can go anytime they want. It doesn't need to be that day. So nobody at all, I'm just disappointed in it, nobody at all wanted to go. If you're not sure about an application, you should be asking to go before the application comes here.
Yeah, that's noted then. Thanks.
We don't need to go. We still can take part whether we go or not.
I'm actually just, because things are jumping back and forward, I'm going to get legal clarification. That's just so we get it 100% right.
Absolutely, Chair. Just to confirm, obviously, this application has been continued for the purposes of a site visit, so it will come back to a future planning committee to determine. The point at which it will come back is at the point essentially at determination stage. So we won't be running through the hearing procedure again. So it's really the members that have been here or online who have read the papers and heard the discussion today and heard from the applicant and the objectors who, you know, will be locked into that decision process. The purpose of the site visit is just really for members just to familiarise themselves with the site should they wish to do so. But I'm conscious a few members, you know, may know the site in any event. But so it's really more about those who are here today and have heard the discussion.
That's great. So is everybody happy with that?
I'm happy with that, Chair, but I've something else to say.
Okay.
I don't know who the rest of the elected members feel, but I don't like folk talking to my back. Objectors and when they came, used to sit at the front where we could see them and they could see us. And it's just a recommendation. But I don't think it's nice for folk to be sitting looking at the back of your heads.
And through you, Chair, obviously, as a matter of process, you know, as for the planning committee to decide and to regulate some of its own processes, and it's something we can look at if members feel it would be better going forward for the objectors and the applicants to come to the table here, as did happen pre the pandemic. Then obviously we can look at that if members feel that would be more beneficial than applicants and objectors sitting behind them and you only viewing them from the screen. Then we can look to, you know, look at that to bring folk back to the top table.
Just on top of that as well, Chair, all the names are missing off of people as well. We used to have the names in front of the people on the board, which was quite helpful for people.
Yep, well, we can take
So
all
they're-
this
they're
forward.
missing as well.
Yep. Yep. Councillor McGee.
I've been over planning for a while, but when there used to be in planning, Ken, that used to be the process. And I would concur, Ken, with Councillor Crawford, that maybe it's less intimidating for the folk to sit behind us right enough. So they're too wise to look at it, but I'd be happy for them to be facing us. Thank you.
We can look at that going forward for members.
Right. That's okay. But the points have been noted, and we'll certainly take it forward, and we'll try and make things as comfortable as possible for everybody that's here. So thanks, and that's noted. Okay, that concludes item 3 in the agenda. I think we take a wee minute and you're more than welcome to stay, but anybody in the public gallery, if they want to leave just now, before we move on to the next. Thanks. Thanks, members. That's the public gallery cleared. So, as members are aware, item 4 on the agenda has been, the application's been withdrawn at the request of the applicant. So we're moving on to item 5 on the agenda, and that's the conclusion report and revised restoration works relating to planning permissions, reference 17/0152/PP, comma 17/0932/PP, and 17/1180/PP at Greenburn Coal Mining Complex, Cumnock. And I think Madeline, you're going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the report in front of you relates to the Greenburn former open cast coal site, which lies around 4 kilometres west of New Cumnock. The site was and is owned and operated by Kier Group, with the first planning application relating to coal extraction at the site being approved in 2001. Various other planning applications to amend and extend operations at the site followed, and ultimately the Greenburn complex was divided into 3 distinct operational areas, those being Dowjig Farm, which included the original Greenburn area, Well Hill Farm and Brayhead Farm. In 2017, the operator submitted 3 separate planning applications for the site for each of these 3 operational areas respectively. These consolidated the previous planning permissions for the site, and they also varied the approved restoration plans for the site, and all 3 areas of the site are now considered to have been restored in accordance with the relevant restoration plans. So here we can see the location of Greenburn coal site outlined in red, with the 3 areas, Dowjig, including Greenburn, Well Hill and Brayhead to the south of the road. So just moving on to some photographs. This slide shows Brayhead Void in 2016. Coaling was suspended here in 2015 and the area was restored between 2017 and 2019, which the results we can see here. The void was infilled and the final landform, which is relatively flat at 197 metres AOD, was completed in 2018. The area has since vegetated and naturalised. A tip that was to the west of the void has been regraded down to the reinstated road, with slopes of 1 in 5 to 1 in 50. This shows at the top the Dowjig void in 2013 and at the bottom in 2021. In 2014, when compliance monitoring began, the Dowjig area comprised of an excavation void, which included a common boundary with the adjacent House of Water site, which we discussed at Planning Committee last month. An agreement was reached between both operators to recover the coal which lies within the overlap area common to both sites. The common boundary was largely worked and reinstated by Hargreaves as part of operations in the House of Water complex, but on the Kier side, the Dowjig void was reinstated to create a water body using backfill materials from the tip area. These works were completed in 2017 and the water body is surrounded by graded slopes which range in gradient from approximately 1 in 3 to 1 in 10 with no exposed rock face. The area is well vegetated and groundwater is considered to have rebounded and is fluctuating seasonally. Signage and life-preserving equipment have also been installed. This shows the Dalricket void in 2017 and 2021. Following completion of coaling within the Dalricket area, the void was progressively backfilled to a relatively flat level at around 210 metres AOD to create a seasonal floodplain. There was also an overburden tip to the south of the area which was regraded. In the foreground of the bottom image, you can see the public road. This was reinstated as part of the restoration of the site, with construction details agreed with ARA. ARA have confirmed that the condition of the road and associated infrastructure, i.e. verges, drainage and signage, were such that the road could be adopted by them. However, it is understood that this part of the road has not yet been formally adopted. This is the Well Hill Farm area in 2017 at the top and 2021 at the bottom. This comprised of an excavation void to the northwest with some progressive backfilling to the south, and there were 2 overburden tips to the west and the south. The area was progressively restored as operations advanced. The area was restored to an undulating landform sloping from 275 metres AOD to 215 metres AOD, with gradients of some 1 in 6 to 1 in 12, and a channel was created to the west of the site for the reinstated Auchincross burn. The southern tip was regraded progressively and restoration was completed in summer 2020. So this shows Auchincross Farm at the top, and the bottom is the site as it is now. In 2017, an extension referred to as the Auchincross extension was approved, and that included the demolition of Auchincross Farm. Construction materials from the farm building were retained for the installation of the farm marker at the location where the farm once stood, and the area was restored as part of the Well Hill Farm operations. So here we can see the railheads which served the site. At the top, that's 2013, and at the bottom, that's 2021. This hasn't been restored along with the vehicle underpass, which provided access to the railhead. These haven't been restored because the operator is currently exploring operations for potential future land uses and is seeking to safeguard this infrastructure in the interim period. From 2022, the operator has been undertaking structural surveys of the twin culverts that form the underpass to assess its current conditions and any remedial actions that might be required. With regards to it not being restored yet, East Ayrshire Council have over the years agreed to multiple extensions in time via exchange of letters and emails, which was in line with the provisions of Condition 1 of the relevant planning permission. This facilitated the operator's ongoing discussions in relation to potential future land uses and potentially retaining the infrastructure. The most recent extension expired on the 1st of January of this year, and as the infrastructure had not been removed and the area not restored, the operator submitted a Section 42 planning application to East Ayrshire Council in December 2023 for a further extension in time to delay removal of the infrastructure. So this is currently pending consideration and will be presented to members for consideration in due course. So finally, as noted previously, Keir are currently investigating future options for the site as a whole. They're also still undertaking some water monitoring, although it's our understanding that they intend to submit a report to SEPA in due course to satisfy them that monitoring can be ceased. So as noted in paragraph 2 of the report, it is recommended that the planning committee note that restoration has been completed in line with the approved restoration schemes and the remaining Section 75 obligations can be discharged. Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. Always love looking at the restoration work. There's some dramatic changes. I'm going to open up for members for any comments, or he's happy just to note the content of the paper. Councillor McGee.
I know it's excellent work. It's nice to see some photos where there's no rain as well.
I was going to ask a question, but I saw the water that's left and the water features that's left. Have we any reports that only open water swimmers or no open water swimmers but swimming? I'm just wondering with the amount of water we've got left. So and we were concerned about that at the time. I'm just wondering if there are any reports going.
I'm not personally aware. We haven't had any reports from the operators or anybody in the surrounding area. The Braehead void is just a kind of, I think it's probably only about maximum about 1 metre deep. It's just a kind of wetland, so I don't think there'd be much swimming going on in there. Yeah, the Daljig void is deeper than that. It is more accessible. So, you know, there aren't restrictions to access as such, so there may be people that want to use it. But yeah, we haven't had any reports of it, certainly.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. I come that way every day, and it's absolutely beautiful now. It really is. See all the wildlife coming back to the wet ponds and that, as you say, the Billy. But what I have got concerns and disappointed, it's Rosa Lances away. The small road is coming across here from the B741 to go to Cumnock. We're still getting heavy traffic on there. Buses, lorries, again, and it's just a single file up until you get to that, just about that area there. So that needs to be addressed. with a bit of signage, I think, but we'll need to take that up with Ayrshire Roads Alliance.
Yeah, but
It's not suitable for heavy vehicles because it's really busy just now because of everything that's going on just now with the wind farms, Brockwell, Jones Brothers, all the construction traffic that are meeting these big heavy vehicles all the time. And there's plenty of passing spaces, but when you get to the narrower road, there's no passing spaces at all. Ali.
that's partly my fault, because Wilson, I had a colleague who'd been up all night with the flooding, so I think he was needing his
no
bed
problem.
later, so I didn't realise it was going to be a
I'll
quick.
take it up with them.
Pass that on.
Ayrshire Roads Alliance, no problem.
I can just clarify that as part of this Section 42 application that we're currently considering for the interim retention of the underpass and the railhead, ARA have requested some further structural surveys of the vehicle underpass from the operator. We've advised Keir of that, and I think they are planning on providing that with us. I think they've also been in contact with Brockwell, because I think the turbines are potentially going to be coming over that road. So it's something that's been noted, and Keir are aware of it and are taking surveys.
I don't see him online requesting to speak, so I'll be happy to note the contents of the people. Thanks very much. That concludes today's proceedings. So thanks for attendance.